Well, good morning, Crosspoint. We are continuing our study on the book of Mark, right, which he opens up by telling us this thing that he is writing. This is the good news about Jesus Christ. And so we're really excited to continue studying here. Ben did an awesome job unpacking some really important moments, right, in the ministry of Jesus, his moment up on the mountain and the transfiguration, his conversation with Peter, and man, just so much to unpack there. And Ben did an awesome job really taking us through that. After those events, Jesus continues his ministry, he continues teaching, but we are headed towards the end of Jesus' ministry here on earth. And towards the end of this ministry, he heads back towards Jerusalem, okay? And so he arrives in Jerusalem, and you've probably heard about this, right, at some point, that this is Palm Sunday stuff. This is the triumphant entry into Jerusalem, and this is the moment where people are waving palm branches, and they're taking off their coats and laying them on the ground, and Jesus is riding in on a donkey, and there's humility to that. There's also a clear sign for the people that are there. It's not just a moment of humility for Jesus. See, a king would ride into a city after he was victorious on a donkey, right? Normally, if he's headed off to war or just whatever, he's riding around on a horse. But in their culture in this time, if a king had just been victorious, he would ride back into the city on a donkey. And so Jesus rides into this city on a donkey, and people are losing it. They are celebrating. Things are awesome. Everybody's going crazy, right? And this is the beginning of what we refer to as Holy Week. This is the week that takes place Sunday to Sunday, that is the final week of Jesus' ministry, his time, before his little bonus time, right? His like post-credits scene. I didn't plan to call it a post-credits scene. It's after the resurrection. That felt disrespectful. It's a big deal. So he's ridden into Jerusalem at this point and spends some time there. And then they actually settle in Bethany, a nearby village where he stays the night, and then the next day heads back to Jerusalem, okay? And so this is after the triumphant entry. I want to pick this up in Mark chapter 11, okay? This is verse 15, where it says, "When they arrived back in Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple and began to drive out the people buying and selling animals for sacrifices. He knocked over the tables of the money changers and the chairs of those selling doves, and he stopped everyone from using the temple as a marketplace. He said to him, 'The scriptures declare my temple will be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have turned it into a den of thieves.' When the leading priests and teachers of religious law heard what Jesus had done, they began planning how to kill him. But they were afraid of him because the people were so amazed at his teaching. That evening, Jesus and the disciples left the city." So this is a big day, right? He heads back into Jerusalem, arrives at the temple, and tosses tables, right? This is table tossing Jesus. This is angry, driving people out Jesus, right? And here's the thing with this moment. It feels a little strange when you read about all these other encounters that Jesus has with people who are in sin, right? Jesus encounters all kinds of people who are in sin, and he greets them, and he welcomes them, and he's gentle with them, and there's compassion there, and there's grace extended, and we see that over and over again through his ministry. But when he arrives at the temple and sees what's happening in there, he has a different response. Right? There is a righteous anger to this moment. That there is a response here that tells everybody in the room right away, what was happening here is not okay, and it's a big deal. Right? So why? Why is this such a big deal? See, I don't think it's just that people are selling animals in the temple. I don't think it's frustration at the presence of animals in the temple, right? Like we might today, if you showed up to church this morning and there were a bunch of like goats and sheep and birds in the lobby, you probably would have walked in and been like, "This is weird and I don't like it." right? It smells bad in here, all right? I just want a muffin and some coffee, and yeah, it would be weird. But God had actually mandated the presence of animals within the temple, right? He had given them the law, and there were all these sacrifices which needed to occur under the law. And so in order to conduct those sacrifices, you need the animals. So it's not the presence of animals in the temple that has Jesus so fired up here. I don't even think it's the fact that money's involved in what's happening completely. I think it's the heart posture of what's happening here. You see, what has happened is a system where the religious leaders of the day, they control which animals are worthy of sacrifice and which are not. Because God didn't just say to bring a goat. He gave instructions on the goat and its age and what it looks like and that it is without blemish. And God is calling the people in the law of Moses, which was given a long, long time before this. He's calling them to bring their best to him as a sacrifice. And he institutes a policy within that the religious leaders, that they would conduct these sacrifices and they would be the ones who help the people follow these instructions that God has given them. And so it's under their authority to say, hey, that this animal you brought, it doesn't meet the requirements that God has given us. But the religious leaders have taken that authority and they found opportunity. They found opportunity to use their authority to lead the people towards God to benefit themselves financially. And so they've moved to a practice at this point where when people would bring animals in, they could reject them and say, well, you'll have to buy one of ours. If you want your sacrifice to be approved, you can go ahead and buy one of our premium, right? Pre-approved goats at just a little bit more than the market value, right? And so this is what is happening in the temple at this point, is the religious leaders have turned this house of worship into a den of thieves. Mark here specifically emphasizes the sale of the doves. He talks about all these animals and the money changers and all this stuff, but he takes the time to highlight the fact that he tosses over the people who are selling the doves. He tosses over their chairs. Now, the reason for this is because doves have a special significance when it comes to the law of Moses. See, there were a lot of instructions given that God gave, not only an instruction, but he gave like a backup plan. Where he would say, hey, if this is what's going on, you need to bring a goat for sacrifice, but if you can't afford a goat, you could bring a dove instead. And so these doves are the animals that people who are poor, potentially even living in poverty, they're the animals that they would bring to sacrifice. And so this isn't just financial exploitation. This is financial exploitation of people who are poor, who are in need. And Jesus arrives here and sees the fact that people who are in need are being taken advantage of on their way to Jesus, on their way to the Father. And you can't let it go. And so he drives them out of the temple. An additional detail in this section here is the place within the temple where this is happening. You see there are layers to the temple, right? There are the outer courts, and then as you advance and get further and further into the temple, who is allowed to enter that area becomes more and more selective, right? And so it starts out with the outer courts, and actually in these very, very outer courts, anyone's welcome. Right? House of prayer for the nations. Anybody's welcome there. But once you go in beyond that, only Jewish people are welcome, and further until you would get to the Holy of Holies, where only the high priest would go, and only one time a year. And the sale of all of these animals, it's happening in the section of the temple where anyone is welcome. It's happening in the part where it's supposed to be a house of prayer for the nations here. The Gentiles are here. And because this is happening in this section of the temple, a place that was for people who are living far from God, people who don't maybe even know about God, are able to come and hear about God and learn about God and worship God and honor God, that has been turned into an opportunity to rob people in need. And what that means is that the God of Israel is being represented to the world in this way. If somebody from outside of the Jewish people wants to come and encounter God, what they're going to encounter is a group of people who are more focused on profit and money than they are on actually leading people to God. And that's how God is being represented to the world. The temple's a big deal in the Old Testament. We actually read that David, who's really, he is the most famous king of Israel, right? King David, and he has all the big stories, right, with Goliath, and he actually, even after everything that he did, God said, hey, it's not actually going to be you that builds my temple. See, David had been involved in so much war that God said, you know what, your hands are bloodied, and I'm actually going to move this on to the next generation. The specifications for the temple are found in the Old Testament, and there are incredible, the amount of detail and money and just fine metals and gems that go into the construction of this temple. This temple is the best picture that we could possibly have. The original temple in the Old Testament is the best picture we could possibly have of the majesty of God here on earth. In fact, I want to read to you guys from 2 Chronicles chapter 7 about the dedication of the temple. When Solomon finished praying, fire flashed down from heaven and burned up the offerings and sacrifices, and the glorious presence of the Lord filled the temple. The priests could not enter the temple of the Lord because the glorious presence of the Lord filled it. When all the people of Israel saw the fire coming down and the glorious presence of the Lord filling the temple, they fell face down on the ground and worshiped and praised the Lord, saying, He is good, His faithful love endures forever. And you picture that snapshot, right? The presence of God fills it. There is fire from heaven. Even the priests are like, we cannot go in there because the presence of God is in there. The response of the people is to fall down on their face and cry out and worship and honor Him. And you go from there to Jesus, the Son of God, arriving at this temple, and it's nothing more than a cheap market run by a bunch of con men. He's disgusted with it. And so he drives them out. See, they have lost their fear and their reverence and their awe before God. And here's the truth. The love of money has led them astray. Along this journey, as they have lost their fear and reverence and awe before God, they have forsaken their master. And they've begun to follow another one. And the love of money and the love of power and the prestige available to them has become their new master. It's something Jesus teaches about in the Sermon on the Mount. And it's led them astray. And they are so lost here. Well, Jesus and his disciples, they leave that evening, right? They head back to Bethany. They spend the night there. But the next day, Jesus and his disciples, they return to the temple. They head back to where they're going to continue ministering here, right? And so Jesus cleansed the temple. He got all this stuff out of there, and he's like, all right, I'm headed back. I'm headed back in, I'm going to head back over there, and I'm going to start teaching about my Father. Right? And so Jesus arrives and he spends the day kind of going back and forth between two things that keep happening that we read about in the book of Mark. He's teaching the people continually, but different religious leaders keep coming in to try to trip him up. Right? And so he'll be teaching and teaching and teaching, and then some expert on religious law will come in and be like, "Hey, Jesus, what's the most important of all the laws?" Ooh. And then Jesus will answer them in a way that astounds them, right? This is the pattern. The Matt Swearingen paraphrase of the pattern, but the pattern nonetheless, okay? And so this is the pattern, right? They'll come in, they'll ask some crazy question that they think is going to mess Jesus up, and then he's going to answer with something heretical, and they're going to be like, boom, committed heresy, execute him. That's their plan. But over and over again, Jesus answers in ways that astound them, and this goes on throughout the day. But kind of late in the day, I want to pick this back up in chapter 12, because Jesus teaches his disciples something. He goes and takes a seat. We read here in verse 41. Jesus sat down near the collection box in the temple and watched as the crowds dropped in their money. Imagine this, right? He plops down next to the collection box, which there's like a bunch of, but he's just watching people bring their money in. That's the rabbi. Well, I'll go give it that one, right? And people are bringing over money, right? Many rich people put in large amounts. I mean, let's be honest. It would have been tempting to show up that day. You didn't even know Jesus was going to be there, right? But he's famous at this point, right? You have to remember, just a couple days before this, he entered the city and people were taking off their coats to lay down for his donkey to walk on. Like, this is big time Jesus. He is famous. He is respected. He is loved and adored. And he's hanging out in the temple. And you showed up, and it just happened that you showed up with your big old heavy bag of money on a day where Jesus is in the temple. Right? And you walk in and you're like, oh, Jesus is there. So what do? You walk over to that collection box, right? You don't go to one of the other ones. You go to that one, you're like, look how heavy it is. Oh, my muscles. Just leave that there. Have a great day, Jesus. So many people are doing this. Then a poor widow came and dropped in 2 small coins. Jesus called his disciples to him and said, I tell you the truth, this poor widow has given more than all the others who are making contributions. For they gave a tiny part of their surplus. But she, poor as she is, has given everything she had to live on. And so Jesus is watching the people give, and she comes in and she drops these 2 coins. They are, we know from the original language that these coins are the smallest denomination of money that exists, okay? Some estimates would put this at around a penny or a half a penny. This is a very, very small amount of money that is dropped in here. And she comes in, drops a very small amount of money, and Jesus watches this. And he calls over his disciples, right? Like guys, come here. She gave more. She gave more than anybody else that's been here today. She gave more. I love how Warren Wiersbe says this. It's not the portion, but the proportion that's important here. Right? It's not about like, well, look, that was a real big portion, right? Like that was a lot of food. It's about the fact that she is willing to give everything that she has. And Jesus, the day after driving out all of these money changers, all these people who are there to exploit others, everybody who has lost sight of who their master really is and has become completely focused on the ways of this world, he is contrasting for them the way the world gives, the way the world is generous, and godly generosity. Right? And there is a crucial difference for us here between the way the world gives and the way God has given and the way God teaches us to give. And I want to break a couple of these things down with you guys, okay? The first one is this, that worldly giving, it is comfortable and convenient. Right? It's comfortable and convenient. I think one of the ways that the world gives is that the world would put giving at the bottom of the budget sheet, right? That if you were somebody who makes your budget, right? I sit down with my budget pretty regularly, enough that my kids could tell you probably what a budget is at 4 and 6 years old, because they've asked me enough times, like, what are you doing? I'm working on the budget. What's the budget? It's a plan for how we're gonna spend our money, right? I sat down with that enough that they could tell you that. And for those of you that regularly do a budget and work through that, if you think about it, you naturally start at the top, right? And at the top, those are the big things, right? The mortgage, we got to pay that. Electricity, it's a need. Wi-Fi, might as well just not have oxygen, right? And we work through the budget and make sure there's money for food and clothes. And I think the way the world gives is it's out of convenience. It's out of comfort. It's if we get to the end of the budget, I mean, there's still some money left. Wow. Well, let's give some of that, right? I'm just like so generous. You know, I got all this money left over at the end of my budget. I can give some of that. It's comfortable. It doesn't stretch us. It doesn't require us to figure out how we are going to make other things happen. It doesn't certainly require us to trust God in any way. It doesn't require us to say, like, well, if I am this kind of generous, I don't know where the other money comes from. It's comfortable. But godly giving, it is sacrificial and costly. I mean, the greatest gift ever given is what Jesus is going to do this week that we're studying. That's the greatest gift ever. Jesus' death on the cross to pay for my sins is the greatest gift of all time. It's the most incredible example of generosity, right? When you think about what generosity really is, like a giving, man, what somebody has not earned or deserved, like just giving in a way that is sacrificial. Giving the way God gives, man, it hurts. Like, it's costly. It's a little scary. It requires surrender. It requires trust. I love what Paul writes in 2 Corinthians chapter 8. He says, "For I can testify that they gave not only what they could afford, but far more. And they did it of their own free will. They begged us again and again for the privilege of sharing in the gift for the believers in Jerusalem. They even did more than we had hoped. For their first action was to give themselves to the Lord and to us, just as God wanted them to do." He's talking about these believers, right? And says, look, I'm going to be honest with you. I'll tell you the truth here, guys. They gave way more than they should have or could have. They gave way more than what would make sense when you looked at their budget. They gave in a way that was incredible. You don't need to tell me your answer to this, but I think we all just need to wrestle for a second. When you think about your giving, and I'm not just talking about what you give to Crosspoint, okay? This is not a sermon where my goal is like, man, I sure hope we have a great offering at the end of the day, right? We're not passing some baskets later. We didn't pull those out of storage so that we could bring that back today. I'm not going to stand next to the boxes at the end of the service and just kind of be like, anybody got some heavy bags? That's not what we're doing. But when we look at what godly giving looks like, the sacrifice attached to that, I think we have to ask ourselves, man, am I giving less than my ability? Am I giving according to my ability? Or am I giving beyond my ability? Am I giving in a way that is just really comfortable? Am I giving in a way that it's like, when you look at my budget, it makes sense, like it's right in line with my ability? Or am I giving in a way where when you would maybe look at my budget, you might say, like, how'd you come up with that number? In a way that requires me to trust, to surrender. See, because worldly giving, it's not the same as how God gives. I also think that worldly giving is motivated by pride. That the reason to give in our world's perspective is, man, I kind of got it going on. Worldly giving wants other people to know, right? Like worldly giving is one of those things where, man, you want to be really generous, but you want to make sure everybody knows how generous you are, right? Worldly giving is what draws us in that moment when we walk into the temple with our big, heavy bag of money to be like, and which one is Jesus close to, right? It's a normal human response, but we have to recognize our sinful nature, these normal human responses are not things that line up with the ways of God. And worldly giving, it is motivated by our pride. Godly giving, though, it is motivated by humility. See, godly giving says, you know what, God, I am so grateful for what you have given me. God, you have provided for me beyond my wildest dreams. God, I want to live out the same kind of generosity that you have showed me. And so, God, I'm going to give. Because it's not even mine to begin with. There's a humility, right, to saying, like, God, everything I have is yours. Everything I have is a blessing from you. And do you know what pushes up against that? Specifically, I think, for us guys, and we work hard. And ladies, you work hard too. But this is our minds, okay? Maybe this is you too, but I only know me. And we work hard. And that paycheck we bring home, it was not handed. It was earned. Right? We had to work hard for that. We had to fight for that. We had to get up early in the morning for that. We had to stay late after work for that. We had to come home tired for that. And maybe you're somebody who's far enough into your career where you think back on the previous promotions that you've had, and you think about where your family is financially today, and man, you look at that and you're like, the Saturdays that I put in to get us here, and the work that you have put in pushes up against the idea that everything that you have is his to begin with, and it was all a gift from him. Guys, let me call us out a little bit. Because I think there are some things that we absolutely believe that erase this idea. See, as a follower of Jesus, I believe that the very breath within my lungs is a gift from him. That my ability to see is a gift from him. That my ability to walk is a gift from him. That my ability to work hard is a gift from him. And so, yeah, a lot of you guys, man, you work really hard. You're a hardworking dude. But who gave you that ability? And there's a reality we need to let sink in for a second, that everything we have been given, every single thing we have is a gift. It's all from him. Our ability to breathe from him, our ability to work is from him. See, our God is somebody who it's all his to begin with, right? Have any of you ever done like a Christmas gift pool, right? Where like everybody draws a name and you're getting like, your brother-in-law something for Christmas because that's just the name you pulled out. And so what that means is your wife is going to tell you enough about your brother-in-law for you to have some help to figure that out, right? And so you do kind of the drawing, and you got to figure it out. And man, sure enough, you guys have had this moment maybe where you got to get the gift for the person who just like they already have everything, right? Like, what do you get for the person that just like they have it already, right? You're like, oh, I don't know what to do here. If they like something, they buy it. Maybe they make a lot more money than you do. And when you think about trying to get them something, it is intimidating for you. And so you're like, I don't know what to get for the person who already has everything. And I think sometimes we look at our generosity towards God as like, well, if everything is already his, right? We're talking about God, creator of the universe, spoke it all into existence. Like, how could my gift even matter to him? How could he even care about this? Right? Like, why does this matter? Why does this make a difference? Why is this important? I think back to when I was a child, right? And my parents taught me to tithe, and I would bring my tithes to church. And looking back at that now, I'm like, cool, 42 cents, right? Like, who cares? This past Christmas, my son Tyler got gifts for everybody. They had like a thing at his school, and so he was able to buy gifts for all of us. And so it was really fun. On Christmas morning, he got me a mug that is like hot chocolate served here, all right? He got me a mug that says hot chocolate because when we watched the Polar Express, which is not my favorite Christmas movie at all, but it's his, right? He loves that movie. And there's the part in the movie where they sing the hot chocolate song. And so like full Christmas dad mode, I've made it my priority to have hot chocolate ready to serve when that part of the movie hits so that I can come running into my kids and be like, hot chocolate, right? And so my son felt loved by that, and when he sees that kind of a mug, he's like, man, this reminds me of Dad. And so he got this mug for me, and I opened it on Christmas morning, and like, oh, right? I mean, genuinely, guys, it meant so much to me. It was this recognition of his love for me. It was this recognition in this moment of like, man, the way I love him is having an impact. Like, he cares. He sees that I love him and that I care about him and that I'm here for him and that I want him to have fun and have joy and like he sees that I'm trying to give him good gifts and he's given me a gift. And how cool is that moment, right? Guys, where did he get the money to buy the stuff at school? It was me. I could buy myself as many hot chocolate mugs as could fit in my pantry, right? Like we might not eat that month, but it's fine. I don't need him to buy that for me. And in the same way, when we are generous, specifically with what we give back to God, it's not because God couldn't do what he needs to do without our money. It's because we love him and we adore him and we want to worship him, and we are just so beyond grateful for all the ways that he loves us that we're just like, God, I just want to give you this gift. And it's out of this humility and this recognition of who our God is and how generous he has been with us that helps us recognize this. And right here, when this woman comes in and she gives everything that she has here. She gives everything that she has to God. There is humility in that. There is trust in that. There is surrender in that. There is sacrifice. It is costly to her. She's risking everything to come before God and say, God, I know how much you love me. I see how much you care for me. And so, God, I'm not going to put my trust here. God, my trust is in you. God, you are my master. You are my Lord. You are my provider, and I trust you with everything that I have. And Jesus, man, he calls his disciples over as quickly as he can because he points at it and he wants to say, it's that, guys. That's what I'm after. I don't care how much the bag of money weighs. What I care about is that heart of surrender, right? The gift that is given here, her gift is her love and her devotion. Her love and her devotion, that's what the gift is. It's her adoration of God. It's her trust. It is her surrender. It's saying, like, God, you're my provider anyway. It's all yours to begin with. And God, I love you. I worship you. I honor you. And man, what would it be like? And I should go ahead and acknowledge this. I'm way over time, so sorry. You came to first service. What would it be like, though, if our lives were lived in this way? If we took this attitude of living and we looked at it not only as the way that we interact with our finances, but the way we live our lives, that we trust God like this. Last week, Ben taught and did an awesome job. I've already had several of you this morning be like, you go out of town last week? Like, no, I was in Kid Point. Okay? That's where I was during first hour last week. That's why I have so many words stored up for all of you. I was in Kid Point, right? And here's the thing, all right? Serving Kid Point was so much fun, but I just want you to imagine for a second a version of Kid Point where parents show up to drop off their kids. And there are volunteers in there waiting for them, probably the right number of volunteers, right? Let's say that it's properly staffed for the amount of kids that are gonna show up. But when the parents show up to drop off their kids, the parents, like, the volunteers are there physically, but their hearts are not there. They didn't show up with humility. They didn't show up with surrender. They didn't show up with love and devotion. What they showed up with was checking a box of doing the right thing. And a parent walks in who showed up today, who said, man, I got to figure out something to do with my family. My family is falling apart, and so I'm going to show up. Maybe church. Maybe that Jesus guy is all he's cracked up to be. Maybe that'll have an impact on my life. And they show up, and they arrive, and they walk into Kid Point, and they're encountered by 3 volunteers who are staring into their phones. And that parent walks in, right? And let's imagine it's a young dad, right? And he walks in and, hello? Yeah, what's up? I brought my daughter. All right, cool. I serve in here every week. Guys, we're called to give our hearts, not just our actions. Thankfully, right, I think what happens in Kid Point is that parents are able to show up and walk in with their child and say, hey, I'm here. And there's a volunteer there who looks at them and, oh my goodness, welcome, we're so glad that you're here. What's your name, sweetie, right? Like, and gets to meet these kids and know them and love them, and they're cared for. And that parent gets to drop off. That young dad, right, maybe is bringing, I'm not that young, is bringing their kids in. And they're able to walk their kids in and look at this environment and go like, wow. I don't know how it'll be in there. That preacher guy might talk for way too long. But I know one thing about this church. I know that they're going to care about my kid. Let's be followers of Jesus who are not in it for the actions, but who give everything we have, who, give sacrificially, financially, but also that we give sacrificially of our time and our energy and our effort, that we bring everything we have before God and we say, God, I trust you with this because you're in charge. You're in control. I believe that you can handle it, God. And so, God, I'm gonna serve in my church this way. I'm gonna give in my church this way. I'm gonna serve my community this way. I'm gonna live amongst my neighbors this way. I'm gonna trust you with everything that you have. I'm gonna give you my whole life. I'm gonna surrender all of it to you. Because I believe that you will provide. Let me pray for us. Father God, I thank you, Lord, that you will always provide. Father God, I pray today, Father, that as we seek to walk with you, to honor you, to follow you, that we will do it the way this widow did, that we will not hold back, we won't give a tiny bit of what we have left over, but that we will recognize humbly that our provision is from you, that it's all yours to begin with, and we will respond to your love and your generosity with that kind of love and generosity to this world, God. That we'll hand everything that we have and everything that we are to you, and we'll say, God, I'm yours. We praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.